spotlight turning to Donald Trump last night, the former president holding a town hall and striking a defiant tone. You can remember those from the days in the White House. Chief Washington correspondent Mike Emanuel live in D.C. with more. Hi, Mike.
Dana, good morning. The former president weighed in on a number of major issues facing the country today, such as the ongoing battle here in Washington over the government's ability to borrow more money, the debt ceiling.
I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default. And I don't believe they're going to do a default because I think the Democrats will absolutely cave because you don't want to have that happen.
With Title 42 set to expire, leading to a major change in U.S. border policy and expected growing crisis at the border, Mr. Trump did not rule out reviving family separations at the southern border.
When you have that policy, people don't come. If the family hears that they're going to be separated, they love their family. They don't come.
There are also questions about the war in Ukraine. The former president says he wants people to stop dying and insists he could resolve it quickly.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours. I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over.
After the town hall, the Biden campaign reacted on Twitter. It's simple, folks. Do you want 4 more years of that? If you don't, pitch into our campaign. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a potential candidate, slammed the former president on the Ukraine war, calling him Putin's puppet. Dana?
All right, Mike Emanuel with that update. Thank you.
Let's bring in Bret Baier, anchor, executive editor of Special Report. Bret, nice to see you. Good morning. I watched last night. I'm sure you did, too.
I did.
What'd you think?
Well, I think 2 campaigns were very happy, the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign.
Yeah.
Both for different reasons. But I think the former president steamrolled a lot of times in that town hall. He got his points out on CNN for an hour. He was in front of what appeared to be a very friendly audience, clapping and laughing at his at different moments. And I think the reaction from Trump world was very positive. From Biden world, you heard that tweet that Mike just mentioned from President Biden. Do you want more of this for 4 more years? They look to run against the former president, believe they're well positioned for that. So I think the fallout is that the former president probably overall had a good night, despite the fact that he raised a lot of eyebrows with some of the things he said.
I'm curious because you've done these before, what you think about a format like that, because what's interesting is that presumably there is a GOP primary that's underway because you have many Republican candidates that are out there, but none of them are really outwardly attacking President Trump at all. So it's almost as if CNN and others, maybe across the country, have presumed that Donald Trump will get the nomination. So he is out there without any sort of competition from the other Republican candidates. And a lot of things that the moderator, who I think did a fine job last night, but she asked him a lot of things that Republican primary voters, if they wanted to have a debate amongst the primary issues for the Republican Party, that really didn't happen last night.
No, in fact, it took a lot of time on January 6th and 2020, and so on substance, there was a lot there. But you're right. So far, there hasn't been a big push against the former president in the GOP primary. Now, the prospect of Chris Christie getting in and being that factor, maybe Governor DeSantis becomes a little bit more forward-leaning against the former president. We don't know yet. But this was an hour of time that the former president used, from his perspective, pretty effectively. Right. I will say a couple of things stuck out. One is saying that maybe the U.S. should go to default. That really shocked some folks up on Capitol Hill, I can tell you that, privately. And in the negotiations of how to get to an answer there, some people up there, leadership-wise, are saying maybe wasn't helpful.
All right. Let's talk about what happened yesterday with James Comer 24 hours ago, right here on this program. Wall Street Journal writes about the Biden family business. And they talk about the Bidens have a right to make a living, but one important question is what Hunter did to earn these payments. Fair question, I think. Right? The media coverage, however, was, well, can we say missing?
Scant.
Major networks, right, had a combined 0 minutes of coverage for the new findings on the Biden family last night. If you check out the New York Times earlier today, their headline is House Republicans do not connect Joe Biden to the rest of these 20 LLCs. So,
I mean, listen,
where's that go?
We do it all the time. We look through the prism of what happens if this was on the other foot, if this investigation and these nuggets of information and details were coming out against former President Trump when he was president or his family. I think that there would be a lot different coverage of that. They're right to point out that there is not, as of yet, the direct line, but there are certainly nuggets here that could get there, and the investigation is proceeding with not only whistleblowers, but facts and bank records. And where is the business that brings in the money? What is the business? I think that this is the beginning of what could be a snowball, but it's got to actually get somewhere in order for other people to pick it up, I think.
People are feeling that one as well. Bret Baier, great to see you. We'll see you tonight on Special Report.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.